Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 15 of the Shiny Developer Series. My name is Eric Nance, and I am so happy that you joined us today. This is a particularly exciting episode on a few levels. We have a very awesome guest that we're going to chat with in just a little bit, but this is the first episode that is full from start to finish, recorded in a brand new production setup. I am really excited about this. I may share more details on all the bits of the setup in future talks. But needless to say, you're going to like the video quality of it, and I have a lot more control over it. And the best of all, it's not relying on third-party programs. It is all custom built with open source. And so I really hope you enjoy our chat coming up right now with statistical programmer and Shiny app developer Maya Gans.
Pretty
Oh, that's
awesome.
crazy. Yep.
Pretty awesome.
Yep. So welcome everybody. We are back with yeah. Welcome back everybody, and we are back with the Shiny Developer Series, and I am very pleased to be joined by former RStudio intern and now statistical analyst at Sitel, Maya Gans. So Maya,
Hey
thank you so much for
everyone.
joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to chat.
Absolutely. So let's hear a little bit about your story and how you got started with R, and of course how you got started with Shiny.
Whew, okay. I think like this is a common story that it's quite circuitous. I did not go to school to become a programmer by any means. I went to do my master's in ecology, but before that, I went to art school. So let's start there.
Hmm.
Then I kind of found my way into biology, and went to get my master's in ecology. And throughout that process, you start with data collection and then go all the way to a thesis or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself really liking the part of the pipeline where I analyze these genetic sequences in this crazy thing called R. And then down the rabbit hole I went. So Shiny kind of came into play also with these like huge data sets. It's so nice to have this like quick EDA environment
Mm-hmm.
to explore variables and stuff. But then like artist hat came in, and I found myself like thinking about how it's so awesome and easy to prototype quickly with Shiny, but what about this custom thing that I want to build, or this custom visualization? I also, as I was getting into Shiny, I also really like started learning D3 and visualization tools like that. So thinking about how to customize Shiny and also using Shiny left me in this really like this meta space of like, I want to, there's like two layers, right? Like I want to learn how to use Shiny, like what's a module, etc. But then there's like, what is the dark magic that is a reactive value? Like what's going on back there?
Yep. Yep.
So I started to like think about that, think about how to like Shiny's this amazing tool, and then I was like, okay, now I want to go behind the scenes. So that's kind of what I get to do now. This job is pretty much a dream job of like working in both R and JavaScript to create custom Shiny bindings, which yeah, that's a pretty fun topic in of itself.
Oh, yes. I know you've been kind of really sharing your story about your JavaScript journey and how you're, like you said, you're tying Shiny in a custom way with that. I definitely want to parse on that a little bit for sure as we talk today. So when I first learned and heard about you, you actually were had a very productive internship at our studio, and you had created
Yeah.
this awesome interface called tidyblocks, which I remember just blew me away at what you're able to accomplish. And I want to definitely hear your take on that experience. And did you have, it sounds like you may have had some experience with Shiny before that internship. And did that help you with creating tidyblocks?
Okay. Time to Wizard of Oz moment. The entirety of tidyblocks, there is no R happening at all.
Wow.
And it's all JavaScript. and now we've reworked it. So we're using React, the framework with that application. But yeah, so the only thing we kind of took from R was applying words to functions like filter, mutate, instead of like, computer software type terminology. So that internship was incredible. I kind of showed up as someone very eager to learn JavaScript and realized, like, if you get into this Shiny dev space, it's super helpful to have some foundational JavaScript knowledge if you want to. It'll unlock so much power in your ability to customize Shiny apps. So the internship, I was kind of like super eager to learn JavaScript and kind of went straight into the deep end. So yeah, so that internship was mostly introducing me to JavaScript. And then after the internship is kind of when I started thinking about, there's a really cool, very tiny Venn diagram of people who are practicing both R and JavaScript, and being inside that Venn diagram, how do I marry these two things? And that's kind of when I found Garrick, who's like a wizard.
Yes,
shout out Garrick.
Oh, absolutely.
Or like, I just want to caveat, like, everything that I've done, and I like all my work, whatever, like, is the art community is so incredible. Like, I don't think I personally did anything by myself ever. Like, you can look at like forks of repos and stuff. Everyone is super helpful.
Absolutely.
I know this is kind of a tangent, but I think when learning these things, the most important thing is that there's no stupid question. Ask the internet, and Garrick will probably answer you.
Yes, he is so helpful. And that reminds me, I so much enjoyed the course that you were at, his course, JavaScript for Shiny users, that you were a TA for. My mind was blown at what was possible. And I'm still trying to put that into practice, but I feel like I'm also on that journey, getting that little intersection that you just mentioned. I feel like I'm getting there, but I'm not quite at your level or Garrick's level yet. So I'm really looking forward to leveling up my skills on that.
Absolutely. So kind of piggybacking off of that idea, and I guess we can get into however you want to do this. You're the host here. I created this like package called shinyBody, which is a custom Shiny input binding.
Yep, absolutely.
And I would really like to talk about, not in super detail, like you can just look at the repo to look at the code itself, but I want to talk about the impetus behind why I created that, and the iterations for how it became what it is.
Well,
now.
Let's do it. Let's, if you don't mind, let's share your
Sweet.
screen. And let's.
Cool. This app, if I just run this here, is an SVG, which is a scalable vector graphic, which, if you're familiar with the DOM and HTML, just as you have nested elements in Shiny, right? You can make your like fluid row and then columns. Those are all different elements. SVGs are really cool because they use XML, which is like the same kind of language, but for images. So we can use that tree structure to query different parts of your SVG. And that's how we're able to then bind it with Shiny to register the body part that's been clicked on. So kind of why I made this app was because I wanted to, like you just said, learn more about how do you get your R to talk to JavaScript, and then JavaScript to talk back to R. So that to me was kind of my first step in, okay, this RStudio internship taught me these foundational skills in JavaScript, and I've been learning R in grad school. How do I marry these two things? Step one was to get them talking to each other. And I really like this repo because it tells a story in my commit history of like, I don't know if there's a name for that, but you can just like brute force use like session info. I'd have to look at the exact commands
Mm-hmm.
to get your JavaScript to talk to R.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But then on top of that, then there's like, so that was like the first step was how do I send these messages from R to Shiny, right? And that
Yes.
works. But if you look at like the source code for like an actual Shiny binding, there's actually a very like rigid structure. And I think the Shiny docs even have like how to build a Shiny input, and it uses JavaScript or jQuery rather, with a very specific architecture to it. So that was kind of the second pass that I took to make a proper binding that could do all those cool things that you're used to, like update text input in your source code.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I guess I think it's important to think about this stuff theoretically, but for me, the way that I learn is just getting my hands dirty and making this, I don't want to call it simple by any means, because there's a lot of concepts you have to puzzle piece together, but there's certainly far more complex custom Shiny inputs in this one. But I think thinking about those, and we've talked about this prior, like at RConf very briefly, but it's something I think about all the time, is there's so much incredible documentation out there for I'm brand new to R. What should I do to get started? And the
Sure.
community like gets so psyched and like, oh, here, let me throw 25 books at you. But then when you're in this like weird middle ground, it's like it gets, blog posts either start getting very, very niche and specific, or it's like, cool, you're on your own, because there's already so much assumed knowledge here. So
Right.
I think I don't know, I've been trying to like catalog ways to like, how do I level up in Shiny? Because the documentation's all there. It's just a matter of asking the right questions and where to find it, if that makes sense. So if anyone this project is on GitHub, and I think it's a pretty good first foray into getting JavaScript talking to R. And if anyone has questions on it, I tried to comment all the code as a learning, like as a pedagogical tool. But if people don't understand things, like the onus is on me, and I would appreciate appreciate your feedback so I can make those docs better.
Oh, absolutely. And I know you're in the process of getting that ready to share, and we'll be sure to update our show notes when that's available.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and there's a little funny story about this is that when we were together at the RStudio Conf, that's when we found out that we both have been making very similar apps like that at the same time without knowing it. Now, mine is not nearly as sophisticated as what you did, but my question, and getting back to the community, I put a question out to the RStudio community trying to figure out, how do I bind this in the context of a Shiny module, which, as you know, is like its own wilderness of things. So now I'm in this whole JavaScript binding and and a module binding and all that fun stuff. And little did I know that Garrick was going to turn that into a whole section of that JavaScript for Shiny users course, which goes into, I think, a lot of the concepts that make something like that happen. So we'll definitely have a link to that course in the notes. It gives you kind of a good preview of what's possible with that technique. But I really enjoyed seeing what you've done, and I think it'll be a great learning opportunity for those in the community that want to take their skill set to another level besides just doing the native images like a ggplot2 or stuff like that. This is really get into the realm of SVG. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it. So very
Exactly. Yeah, I also want to, there's also David Granjon just came out with a book that I think touches on some of this stuff too. So I don't want to say like I'm a pioneer in education in this by any means. I just mean that like it's a really cool field, and we're all kind of it's so new and exciting. But yeah, it's pretty fun to learn these things.
Yeah, and actually, you are a co-author of a book about JavaScript for data science as well. So, quick plug for that. It's on my bookshelf.
Look,
You know, look at it. You came prepared.
Yeah. Right here.
Yeah, so that's been a great read. I haven't read through all of it yet, but certainly that's been helpful to kind of see what JavaScript can do even outside of Shiny itself. So definitely check that out, viewers, if you're interested in that too, for sure.
Yeah, I would never besmirch R. programming in R feels like home, but JavaScript is a language of the internet. So
Yeah.
it is pretty, it's a good skill to have.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can never go wrong with it. So you are been making a lot of cool apps in your work, and I want to transition to another one you've made that's definitely specific to life sciences and issues that, since you and I are in the same industry, we can share notes about this. Reviewing data sets and the specific formats they have can be really tedious. And so I want you to maybe show us a bit about this other app you've done called tidyCDISC. So maybe we could hear a bit about that.
Awesome. So as I load up this instance, I can tell you all that this app lives at bit.ly/tidyCDISC, and we can.
Cool. I'll be in the show notes for sure. Yep.
Awesome. So before I jump into this problem, I am fairly new to the clinical trial space, but I think those fresh, naive eyes are kind of awesome in app development and trying to ask your client, okay, like what do you actually need? So CDISC is a file format for clinical trials, and you start to see these patterns where certain files have like very specific column names, so that's consistent. And then you can bind, you kind of do like a pivot and left join or whatever the special sauce is. But while each trial is kind of its own snowflake, there are these commonalities that you can leverage and haven't really been leveraged in a programmatic way. So we built this app so that you can explore your data, at least as a first pass, before creating your tables and figures for the FDA in an approved software or whatever. But this is so what's really cool, what was really fun about this app was it has 3 components. But before I even get into those, this was my first time using Golem, which was really awesome, especially when each of these tabs were created by a different person. So Golem gave us this really awesome framework that we each get to like code in our own style, but still it is synthesized in this really nice way that if someone is to read this package or take it on, it's like, it's kind of got this readable file structure, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I am one of the biggest cheerleaders of Golem since the early days. And those that haven't heard about it before, we did interview Colin Fay, the primary author, in our Shiny Developer series last year. So definitely check that out. But yes, I am using Golem. Every single app I make now, big or small, is a Golem app. So
That's awesome.
I've gone Golem all the way now.
Yeah, I think if you're making like a tiny little prototype, maybe it's a little overkill,
Yeah,
but
that's
certainly
fair.
that's a good that's a good like framework to learn it. But anyways, if
Yep.
you're working with a team of people, I highly recommend it for easy like collaboration. And like now I like, as we jump into this, I built this first module, but my colleagues built the other 2, and I can very easily go into, maybe I can't understand every single line of code in 5 minutes, but I understand the hierarchy and architecture of the app. And I'll go through this, that's kind of like a really important thing to highlight. So so this was really fun to build. This whole area was a custom binding that I created.
Wow. Looks really slick.
And it took a lot of engineering and thinking about, but essentially we have on this page, we uploaded all our files. And what happens here is we create these palettes of blocks based on those column names, and you can drag those in. So this is diastolic blood pressure. For those of you that are not in the medical community, it's think of any insert numeric variable here. And then we can drag in this mean block and calculate at a particular time point within the study. And you get this GT table output, which GT is also a really fun package to use.
Nice. Yes.
So you get that. And you know, I think inspiration behind these block dragging was definitely tidyblocks is like behind some of that, having
Mm-hmm.
this like GUI front end to table generation. And so what's cool about this is this binding now knows, sorry, that you have these two blocks inside of it. But I can also bring in, let's do a categorical variable, like let's say race, and then I can do a frequency, and that automatically gets populated. And again, I can move these things around
Oh,
and it's
wow.
getting updated in place. What else is pretty cool is we can group our data, which, you know, is just essentially adding a group by. So here I'm grouping it by the different treatment types.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, since I can like go full nerd in this safe space,
You
it
bet.
was really fun to, not only is this a custom shiny binding, but so is this drop down, and I had to bind it to this binding. So as you saw when I dragged in here, we have these 2x2 blocks here. There's like really common to make tables. So we call them like recipes. So
Sure.
I needed to get this recipe to talk to this input binding. So now we're
Okay.
bringing stuff from JavaScript to R, back and forth. It's really fun.
Wow. Yeah, my mind is kind of blown already because we've been trying to crack this nugget for the longest time of how do we, with the data in a standard way, how do we leverage that standardization, but at the same time, alleviate the need to manually program all these different summaries every single time. This is really
Totally.
solid to me.
So again, for people like outside of this industry, each FDA report has like 1,000 tables associated with it,
That's not an
and
exaggeration, folks. Yeah.
you start seeing these common patterns like, oh, this isn't, I mean, sure, there's complex statistics happening, but like 2/3 of these tables are just like the mean and standard deviation. Like
Right.
we can do that.
Right.
um so yeah, living in this gray area between automation, but also giving the user the ability to customize has been a really fun problem to kind of think about. So another thing here, which is cool, is each of these blocks is itself a module. So
Hmm.
we built this so that you can like, oh, I want a Poisson or I want a whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's fairly easy to just add your own stats block. This kind of, we have an ANOVA here just as a proof of concept that like we're in R, so you can do stats.
Yeah.
But, but if you want to do something more complex than that, this is all soon to be on GitHub, and we hope that people will build on it.
So this is great, Maya, that you've been able to, implement this structure so that, like you said, all these different stats are different modules. So that if you have future developers on a team that want to program a different technique, you've given them basically the platform to do it. It's really solid.
Absolutely. So this population explorer part is you're making plots, which essentially this is a module, and then these little cuties are nested inside that module. And because Golem has this very opinionated way of naming files,
Sure.
it's pretty easy to see like, oh, okay, this scatter plot talks to this population explorer module, which talks to the entire application. So like, this was, yeah, I guess it's just a lot of fun, not only designing shiny apps, but thinking about if you have these larger apps, their kind of framework, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's like you're setting a blueprint for setting yourself up correctly for, obviously getting whatever your initial version is of this. But now you've set the stage via what Golem gives you and just a more careful kind of design thinking on your part to extend this in the future with however big or small your team gets, as this app goes on. So absolutely.
Exactly.
It's opinionated, but I think it's the right way opinionated, in my humble opinion.
Well,
Very
awesome.
cool. Yeah.
So yeah,
So it looks like you can choose like the different explanatory variables and the y-axis
yeah,
and all just
so
automatically updates, right?
yeah, and I think this is for users that are familiar with Shiny, this is more out of the box, just conditional outputs. Like, since you're picking a scatter plot, then your variables should be bound to only numerics,
Yes, yes.
and stuff like that. And then we're using Plotly because
Oh yeah.
why
I'm
not? You're in a
I'm
Shiny app.
Plotly
You
all the
should be
way now
using
for my
Plotly.
plots. Yeah, it'll default to Plotly, and then if I have to, I'll do an export into a ggplot2 version. But man, you can't beat Plotly for these things.
And my Plotly expertise is taking my ggplot code and wrapping it in ggplotly. So
That's how I
that's all.
started. Yep. Yep. But
So that's all I got there.
well, yeah, I will say though that I was fortunate at last year's R Pharma to attend Carson's Plotly workshop, and that was kind of
Oh,
like how
awesome.
you were, in your journey with JavaScript and Shiny. I feel like I'm starting to do that with Plotly. But best of all, he's open sourced the book Plotly for R. So if anybody wants to take their Plotly skills to the next level, that book is an excellent, excellent read. Highly recommend it. But yeah, I'm Plotly all the way in my
Are
my
you
visuals. Yep.
when you're doing Plotly, writing Plotly add-ins or whatever, are you doing that in JavaScript? Like, I imagine adding this like custom hover text would be.
Yeah, so that it comes with native hover stuff, but then if you want to customize, I'll probably go just with some native JavaScript code for it. I haven't dived that much in yet. I'm just getting to know like the Plotly syntax instead of the ggplot wrapper because I
Got
need to
it.
start doing some other weird things of like composing plots together and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I'm slowly learning.
Nice. Yeah, it's a fun iterative process. Yeah, and then just for the sake of completion, I'll pop
Yep.
over to this last tab where while we were creating plots, on the population level of the uh, study, if you can, like, based on those plots, you see one outlier patient, you can look at their what's called patient narrative. So the doctors will plot data like when they visit, and if anything happened, if any adverse events or whatever. And we're using, I think it's called Shiny Timevis. This
Oh,
is
this
this is
is
not.
by Dean Attali, right?
Yeah,
Timevis?
it's
Yeah.
it's really
Yep. I
awesome.
love that package.
Um,
Yeah.
and super super slick, easy to use. And then you can see some kind of basic plots for that patient, and output as a PDF. So
Really
so
cool.
yeah, that's kind of a tour of the app. It's been really fun, both from a framework standpoint, custom standpoint, and the fact that it's open source is really just can't be beat.
Well, certainly, as we've been on this great demo of what Shiny can do in life sciences, this is what I hope we see more of: is we collaborate together, we share what we've done, and we can learn from each other. So this is already a really great example that I know I have people I work with that are gonna go crazy over this. So I will
I
certainly be happy to collaborate further if we see ideas that we
That'd be
can build
awesome.
upon it. Yep.
We we demoed this briefly at the our medicine conference,
Mm-hmm.
and I've gotten so many emails about, like, with the header like, we're doing something like this too, which I don't think our industry is unique in that you have all these really smart, awesome developers doing kind of the same, reinventing the wheel in their own silos.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
hopefully, yeah, in this industry and others, we can foster more collaboration.
That's the goal, right? I'm really looking forward to playing with that a bit more. So, we're going to transition a little bit away from life sciences. Something you did quite recently that I thought was really fascinating is you have been working on extending a package that came out pretty recently from Sharla Gelfand called ggkeyboard, and you've put a Shiny app in front of it. So I'd love for you to tell us a bit more how that idea came about and what fun
So
plans you have for that.
that's actually really awesome. I will, and I thought about the app from like an accessibility standpoint. It'd be really cool to have a virtual keyboard. Um, and if you it really was recycling a lot of that shinyBody code, because
Okay.
essentially it's a single SVG, and you have these little SVGs along with it. And then I added this layer where you can both click on the keys, or when you type on your keyboard, it responds to that. So
Oh, yeah,
it was
cool.
it was building on that code, but when Will proposed that, I was like, oh, I think I know how to do that.
All right, let's see what's powering shinykeyboard.
So again, and if you're looking for source code to follow, I kind of would advise you start with the shinyBody thing, but this is a really similar flavor that we have our keyboard input. So you just give it an ID. This was based off of Sharla created all of these keyboards with ggplot. So I have officially submitted this as an entry to the Sharlaverse. We have many of her color palettes. And then just a text output just to see what we're doing. So if I fire this up here, you can see that I can click on a key and that will register.
Wow.
And then you can also toggle to multiple key clicks, because if I want to Control Alt Delete or something. And then also I'm typing right now, which you can't see.
That's amazing.
And then if you press multiple keys. So yeah, this was really fun to work on, and it's one of those projects that I was like, oh, this is really cute. And then we received all these messages about how we can use this potentially for accessibility reasons, and I'm like, oh, that's actually useful. I think like trying to think about tools in a way that's like, I want to learn how to create this from a selfish standpoint, like that body visualization I made. But then also now I've kind of tried to think about like, okay, now what tools does the world need? What would actually, be useful? So yeah, this was a really fun input to create.
So yeah, we'll definitely have a link to the repo in the show notes. I know you've had a great collaboration, but yeah, we're excited to share this with the community. Very cool.
Yeah, it was really fun to work with Will on this, and I also want to, as like I think I talked about a little bit earlier about how like when you're learning these things, don't be afraid to ask any question, because that is how you will learn. And Twitter has been really awesome. Like I'm not one for social media really, but like this collaboration was born out of Twitter. So like
Very
shout
cool.
out Will. This was super fun to work on.
Excellent. Well, again, it's a great story of developing in the open, and you never know where these ideas will lead to. So
Exactly.
very, very cool stuff. So I always like to kind of our last kind of topic. I do this with every guest, but as you've been in Shiny pretty recently now, and you had that fresh perspective coming in, as a few years ago, what advice do you have for those Shiny developers in our audience that are seeing what you've built and they're amazed, probably like I am? What advice do you have for them about taking their skills to the next level, such as what you've been working on these days?
That's a really good question, and I think about that a lot. I try to take pretty detailed notes on the steps of the process, but inevitably there's like gaps that I've missed. So I think it's important to have these ambitious goals of like something you want to design as your stretch goal, and then create these smaller milestones, because and then you can work towards learning how to do those smaller things, and it'll eventually you'll get to that finish line. I know that's super vague, but I think that in this world of like making custom things, I don't think there's one clear road for all the things you need to learn, except for
Well, of course, right? Yes, but that's great advice. We all have our own path. Some of us have learned of a lot of bumps in the road, and a lot of us are also able to, be fortunate and see what others have done and learn from that too. So it's probably a hybrid of both
Yeah.
at some point.
If
Yep.
you want something concrete, read people's source code. Read the source code of like the Dreamers app where they make those little
Oh,
widgets.
yes,
That's
yes.
really awesome because it's like, okay, I can wrap my head around a single radio button or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, you know?
Yeah, yeah, little things like that. In fact, it's funny. They have that app, like that demo app, right? That I every time I use Shiny Widgets, I boot that demo app up like every single time because it's like
Same.
right there. It's like, that's the best way to learn is if you have something right in front of you and then you can see the code behind it and then you can kind of extend it
Exactly.
or do what you need to do. So I've been using a heck of a lot of these newer UI packages that are doing brilliant stuff under the hood.
Yeah, fork things you like and then
Yep.
break it. Break every line.
Yeah, I know back when I was doing that very inferior body visualizer, I broke a heck of a lot of shiny stuff on that one, but it
But
was the
that's how
best way
you
to learn.
learn.
Yep, that's well said. Well said. So Maya, it's been awesome to have you on the show. I've been wanting to do it for a long time. For
This
those
was
that
so
want,
fun.
I'm glad it was. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what are the best ways that they can reach you?
Mycelium, my Twitter below.
I try to do what I can. Yes, yes, we will obviously have that in the show notes as well. And looks like you're sharing stuff on GitHub too, so we'll make sure I have your GitHub profile linked as well.
Awesome. Thank you both so much.
Well, thank you, Maya, for coming on, and everybody will be back right after this. All right, my thanks to Maya for joining us. And she also gets a lot of credit for being the first guest to go through this brand new production pipeline. And for those that are curious what I am using for that video conferencing portion of the episode, I am using a brand, somewhat new tool created by a very brilliant broadcaster and technical developer called OBS Ninja. And while I am using OBS Studio to actually process the recording on my end and bring all the scenes together, this tool is based on WebRTC and actually does not need OBS itself if you want to try it out. Anyway, I'm really excited what this tool is going to bring for the future interviews that we have for the developer series going forward. As usual, if you would like to get the links to all the things that Maya and I talked about in this episode, along with the past episodes, please check out shinydevseries.com for all the links to the previous recordings and all the show notes associated with those. And stay tuned to the YouTube channel in particular. We got more episodes coming up in the pipeline. And I dare say I'm going to start getting my hands a little bit dirty, so to speak, in a good way, with Shiny app development with some really cool projects I have in mind. So with that, I'm going to close up episode 15. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.